The cameras stopped rolling. In the middle of a taping at the Dr. Phil studio, something happened that no one saw coming. A mother sat in a guest chair, tears streaming down her face, talking about her son who disappeared 8 years ago. She hadn't heard his voice, hadn't seen his face, hadn't known if he was alive or dead. And then, the studio door opened. Dr. Phil turned his head. The audience gasped, and the woman in the chair nearly collapsed because standing in the doorway, looking older, thinner, and carrying the weight of nearly a decade of silence, was her son. This is the story of what happened when Dr. Phil stopped the show, broke every protocol in the book, and orchestrated one of the most powerful reunions ever captured on television. If you think you know how this ends, you don't, because what happened next changed everything. 8 years earlier, Daniel Harper was 19 years old. He lived in a small town in Ohio with his mother, Linda, and his younger sister, Emma. By all accounts, he was a good kid. He worked part-time at a grocery store, helped around the house, and had plans to start community college in the fall. But he also carried something heavy that no one in his family fully understood: shame. Daniel had struggled with addiction since he was 16. It started with painkillers after a sports injury, then spiraled into something darker. His mother tried everything: rehab, therapy, intervention after intervention. But Daniel felt like a burden. He felt like he was destroying his family. And one night, he made a decision that would haunt everyone he loved. He left. No note, no explanation, just gone. Linda searched for months. She filed missing persons reports. She hired private investigators. She posted on social media, handed out flyers, contacted shelters across multiple states. But Daniel had vanished completely. And as the months turned into years, hope began to fade. But Linda never stopped looking. And 8 years later, she found herself sitting across from Dr. Phil, desperate for answers, desperate for closure, desperate for anything that might bring her son back. The taping had started like any other episode. Dr. Phil welcomed Linda onto the stage, and she told her story with the kind of raw emotion that only a mother who has lost a child can convey. She talked about the guilt, the sleepless nights, the wondering. The worst part, she said, wasn't not knowing where he was. It was not knowing if he knew she forgave him. "I just want him to know," Linda said, her voice breaking. "But I was never angry. I was never disappointed. I just wanted him home." Dr. Phil listened the way only Dr. Phil can, not with pity, but with presence. He leaned forward, his voice steady and firm. "Linda, if Daniel is watching this, what would you say to him right now?" Linda looked directly into the camera. "I would say, come home. Please, just come home. There is nothing you could have done that would make me stop loving you." The audience was silent. Dr. Phil nodded slowly, then looked toward the producers off camera, and that's when something shifted. "Hold on," Dr. Phil said. He stood up. The audience stirred, confused. Dr. Phil never stops mid-segment, never. But he walked to the edge of the stage, spoke quietly to someone off camera, and then turned back to Linda. "Linda," he said carefully, "I need you to trust me for a moment." She looked at him bewildered. "What's happening?" "Just trust me. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." What Linda didn't know, what the audience didn't know, was that Dr. Phil's team had been working behind the scenes for weeks. They had tracked down Daniel. He was living in a halfway house in Colorado, clean for 6 months, working at a construction site, and terrified to reach out to his family. When Dr. Phil's producers contacted him, he broke down. He wanted to come home, but he didn't know how. Dr. Phil made him an offer. "Come to the show. I'll be there with you. We'll do this together." And Daniel said yes. Now standing backstage, Daniel was minutes away from seeing his mother for the first time in 8 years. He was shaking. A producer stood with him, hand on his shoulder. "You ready?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "I don't think I can do this." "You already are," she said. Back on stage, Dr. Phil was preparing Linda. "I'm going to ask you to do something very difficult," he said. "I'm going to ask you to stay seated no matter what happens next. Can you do that for me?" Linda nodded, confused and scared. "Why? What's going on?" Dr. Phil didn't answer. He looked toward the side entrance and gave a single nod. The door opened, and Daniel walked in. The reaction was instant. Linda's hands flew to her mouth. She stood up despite Dr. Phil's instruction, legs buckling beneath her. The audience erupted, some crying, some gasping, all on their feet. And Daniel, frozen in the doorway, looked at his mother with the face of a man who had been carrying guilt for nearly a decade. Dr. Phil moved quickly. He stepped between them, not to block, but to guide. "Linda, breathe," he said firmly. "Breathe. He's here. He's real. He's here." Linda couldn't speak. She was sobbing, reaching toward Daniel, but unable to move. Daniel took a step forward, then stopped. He pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled, worn envelope. He held it up, his voice barely a whisper. "I wrote this the day I left. I've carried it every day since. I didn't know how to give it to you." Dr. Phil took the envelope gently. "May I?" Daniel nodded. Dr. Phil opened it, read it silently, and then looked at Linda. "He wants you to hear this." He handed the letter back to Daniel. "Read it to her out loud." Daniel's hand shook as he unfolded the paper. His voice cracked as he began. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I hurt you. I know I let you down. But I need you to know that leaving wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I loved you too much to keep destroying you. I thought if I left, you could move on. You could be happy again. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong. I've been wrong about so many things, but I was never wrong about how much you mean to me. I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye. I'm sorry I made you wonder. I'm sorry for every tear you cried because of me. If I could take it all back, I would, but I can't. All I can do is tell you this. I'm still your son, and I still need you." By the time Daniel finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Linda was sobbing so hard she couldn't stand. Dr. Phil stepped aside, and for the first time in 8 years, Linda and Daniel stood face to face. "Can I hug you?" Linda asked, voice breaking. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face, and then they collapsed into each other. The embrace lasted nearly 2 minutes.
The cameras kept rolling, but no one made a sound. Even the crew, hardened by years of emotional television, were wiping their eyes. Dr. Phil stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, letting the moment breathe. When they finally pulled apart, Linda held Daniel's face in her hands. "You're here," she whispered. "You're really here." "I'm here," Daniel said. "I'm so sorry." "Don't," Linda said firmly. "Don't apologize. You're here. That's all that matters." Dr. Phil stepped forward then, his voice gentle but authoritative. "Daniel, I want you to know something. What you just did, walking through that door, that took more courage than most people will ever have to summon in their entire lives. You didn't have to come here, but you did. And that tells me something about who you are." He turned to Linda. "And Linda, what you just did, staying seated, waiting, trusting me, that took strength. You've been strong for 8 years. You get to rest now." He guided them both to sit down. "No," he said, "we're going to do something. We're going to talk. We're going to figure out what happens next. Because this reunion, this is just the beginning." What no one in the audience knew was that Dr. Phil had already arranged everything. A treatment plan, a family therapist, a place for Daniel to stay while he continued his recovery, even a job interview lined up for the following week. Because Dr. Phil doesn't just create moments, he builds bridges. Over the next 30 minutes, the conversation unfolded. Daniel talked about his addiction, his shame, his fear of coming home. Linda talked about the guilt she carried, wondering if she had pushed him too hard, if she had failed him. Dr. Phil, in his signature style, cut through the noise. "Let me be very clear," he said, looking at both of them. "Addiction is not a moral failure. It's a disease. And Daniel, you didn't fail your mother. You got sick. And Linda, you didn't fail your son. You loved him. That's all you could do. And that love, that's what brought him back." He leaned forward. "Here's what happens now. Daniel, you're going to continue your recovery. You're going to go to meetings. You're going to see a therapist. You're going to rebuild. And Linda, you're going to support him, but you're also going to take care of yourself, because you can't pour from an empty cup." He pulled out a card, handed it to Linda. "This is a family counselor. You're going to call her tomorrow. You're both going to start therapy together, not because you're broken, but because healing takes work." Linda took the card, clutching it like a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered. Dr. Phil stood, signaling the end of the segment. But before the cameras cut, he did something he rarely does. He walked over to Daniel and put a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, kid," he said quietly. "You came home. That's the hardest part. Everything else, we'll figure it out." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. The audience gave a standing ovation. Not the polite kind, the kind that shakes the room, the kind that says, "We see you. We're with you. You're not alone." Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the taping ended, Linda and Daniel stayed on stage for nearly an hour. They talked, they cried, they laughed. Dr. Phil stayed with them, not as a host, but as a guide. At one point, Linda's daughter, Emma, who had been watching from backstage, joined them. The family that had been fractured for 8 years was whole again. But the story doesn't end there, because 3 months after that reunion, Daniel sent Dr. Phil a letter. In it, he wrote, "You didn't just reunite us. You gave me a reason to believe I was worth saving. Thank you for not giving up on me when I had given up on myself." Dr. Phil keeps that letter in his office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is create space for people to come home. The envelope Daniel carried for 8 years, Linda framed it. It hangs in their living room now, next to a photo from that day on the Dr. Phil stage. A reminder that it's never too late, that love doesn't have an expiration date, that coming home, no matter how long you've been gone, is always possible. Dr. Phil once said, "You can't change what you don't acknowledge." That day, Daniel acknowledged his pain. Linda acknowledged her love. And together, with Dr. Phil as their guide, they acknowledged that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about building a future. And that's exactly what they did. But there's more to this story that needs to be told, because what happened in the months after that reunion revealed something even more powerful about the human capacity for forgiveness and transformation. Daniel didn't just return home. He rebuilt his life from the ground up. He attended NA meetings 5 times a week. He worked with the therapist Dr. Phil had arranged. He got a job at a local community center, helping other young people struggling with addiction. He became the person he always had the potential to be, but never believed he could become. Linda, too, began her own healing journey. She joined a support group for parents of addicts. She learned that loving someone doesn't mean saving them. She learned boundaries. She learned that her son's recovery was his responsibility, but her love could be his foundation. And slowly, The guilt that had consumed her for 8 years began to lift. 6 months after the show aired, Daniel celebrated his 1-year sobriety anniversary. The whole family gathered at Linda's house. Emma was there with her fiancé. Linda's sister flew in from California. And in the center of the living room, next to that framed envelope, sat a new photo. Daniel receiving his 1-year chip with Linda standing beside him, both of them smiling. Dr. Phil sent a card. It read, "Proud of you, kid. Keep going, one day at a time." The impact of that episode extended far beyond one family. Thousands of people reached out to the show, sharing their own stories of estrangement, addiction, and lost hope. Parents who hadn't spoken to their children in years found the courage to reach out. Young people struggling with shame found the strength to come home. Because sometimes all it takes is seeing one person do the impossible to believe that you can too. That's the legacy of that day. Not just a reunion, not just a television moment, but a reminder that no matter how far you've gone, no matter how long you've been lost, there is always a way back. And sometimes all you need is someone willing to meet you halfway. Someone like Dr. Phil, who understands that healing isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Daniel still carries that envelope sometimes. Not every day, but on the hard days. The days when recovery feels impossible. The days when shame tries to creep back in. He carries it as a reminder of where he's been and how far he's come. And every time he looks at it, he remembers what Dr. Phil told him that day. You came home. That's the hardest part. Everything else, we'll figure it out. And they did.